Welcome. I'm John A. Warnick, founder of the Purposeful Planning Institute. We're excited you're joining us for a PPI Thought Leader and Industry Innovator webinar. I hope you agree with the mindset of the PPI community that our best days lie just ahead of us. To get to where we want to go, we must cultivate a beginner's mind and pursue the path of mastery, not just expertise. Our PPI Thought Leader and Industry Innovator webinars help illuminate more meaningful and powerful ways in which we serve and can grow our practices. Each webinar helps us connect, engage, learn, and inspire. If you've not already taken the bold step of joining the Purposeful Planning Institute, we hope you'll do so soon. Visit our website for additional information. And for you, our guests, and for all the incredibly talented and compassionate members of the PPI community, we remind you these recordings are intended for the use and benefit of our members and guests, and sharing webinar recordings and links without express permission from PPI is prohibited. Enjoy and thrive.
Welcome to Purposeful Planning Institute Thought Leader and Industry Innovator Series. Today's topic, Marvin Blum's journey into the soft side of estate planning. As you know, I'd like to start off with a purposeful quote. We, as estate planning advisors, have all witnessed the horror stories of inheritances passing to unprepared heirs, fueling challenging family dynamics. We have skills to help these families achieve a different outcome, one where responsible inheritors preserve and pass down a meaningful legacy. Let's discover those skills and tap into them to help our clients' families achieve multi-generational success. And John A., I'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you, Leandra. It really is a privilege today, a long-awaited privilege, in fact, to have Marvin Blum as our thought leader guest. I've been admiring Marvin's work from a distance for a long time. Marvin, it is our tradition in these PPI Thought Leader webinars to ask our guests if they would share their purposeful odyssey. That's the story, in your own words, of your personal and professional journey that brings you to where you are today. We're going to dive into some of these developments along the way, but I'd love to hear if you could take 3 to 5 minutes and share your purposeful odyssey. I'd be very grateful.
Well, thank you, and I'm honored to be connecting with you, John A. I have been an admirer of yours for many, many years. You're truly a legend in this space, and it's an honor to be part of this program today with you. My personal story starts back in Fort Worth, Texas, where I was born into a very hardworking family who operated a small family business. And I grew up working really, really hard. Early on figured out that the focus for me was to get an outstanding education, and that would give me a path into a life that would be a very meaningful career for me. I went to University of Texas and I got an accounting degree, which was a really good fit for me. I'm kind of wired to be an accountant. I have a numbers head, and I enjoyed that very much. But I was frankly way too young at that point to be out into the career world. I was only 19 when I graduated college because I went through so fast. And I knew that I wanted more education, so I went back to law school. And during law school, I had a eureka moment, the kind of aha moment we all hope we'll have when we're on our path to figuring out our career. And the eureka moment happened in my estate planning class with Professor Stanley Johansson at University of Texas Law School. And it was the first time I had this feeling that I had discovered my destiny. I knew what I wanted to do. I remember leaving and going and calling my parents and saying, I want to be an estate planning lawyer. And they really didn't know what that was, because they thought a lawyer meant going to court. And this didn't sound like a real lawyer to them. But it has really been a great fit for me. And I embarked on a career as an estate planning lawyer over 40 years ago. And often give Stanley Johansson the credit. He often teases me saying, "Where are my royalties?" And but I but I'm very, very grateful to him. And you know, it was the traditional path that you so often see. I started out in a very technical, with a very technical focus. I went to work in a big law firm. I was a tax guy. I was technical, and it really suited me just to a T. And but I discovered early on I wanted to leave the big law environment and go into a boutique setting. So I opened my own practice because I wanted to do it the way I thought it ought to be done. And the only way I could do that would be to open up, to hang out a shingle and do it the Marvin Blum way. And became very busy, and I'm very grateful for that. But my real focus again still was tax and technical stuff. And I became an ACTEC fellow, and I still had this CPA background. And I, you know, was doing a lot of speaking and writing articles, and it was very gratifying. The firm grew. We had about 30 lawyers. We were busy. But then I started to have these wake-up calls because I started seeing inheritances going bad. And it really woke me up. I saw siblings at war with each other over family businesses. I saw some really ugly stuff happening, and it made me wonder, hey, what is it that we as estate planners can do to help our clients avoid these pitfalls? And I'll end by saying, I think the biggest wake-up call of all was a few years ago when my brother passed away unexpectedly. And I had drafted all those documents, and I had done the standard, you know, planning that you do. But I had never been so close to the activation of all those documents as I was in his unexpected death and dealing with his widow and his kids and all that. And it was like a real big wake-up call to me that the work we do impacts lives. These are not just documents. These are not just a bunch of words. And the way we structure these documents has an effect on people's lives. And I saw how that played out for his family. And it really brought me to the heart side of estate planning, what I call the soft side, which is kind of a misnomer because this stuff is not really soft. Might imply easy, but this stuff is not soft. This stuff is really hard. But it is the heart side to help people address the heart aspects of the estate planning process.
You know, Marvin, I think the vocabulary is something that we really get tripped up on, and I keep hearing, "Oh, you do that soft stuff, don't you?" And there is that pejorative tone sometimes of that's the easy stuff. You know, I'm doing the really hard stuff over here, dotting the I's and crossing the T's with the legal structuring. But I want to make a point here, and then we'll dive into this. I think David Claflin, who has been a member of PPI for a long time, has repeatedly said, Marvin's one of the leaders in the field of qualitative estate planning. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, but I want to help everybody understand purposeful planning embraces two sides, two branches. And you've got the quantitative or technical planning, and then you've got the qualitative, or what we would refer to as the soft side. And I think too often people think of purposeful planning only as the soft side, the qualitative. It's actually the marriage of the two. You've drawn, in your writings, you've referred to, give an attribution to a couple of important figures within the PPI world, a fellow and a dean, the fellow being Jim Grubman and the dean being Matt Wesley. And one of the things that really caught my attention, because I'm a football fan, is the football metaphor. And I'd love to have you share with that, what you've learned from both Grubman and Matt Wesley around the football metaphors that they draw.
I'm happy to do that, John A. And you know, being a football fan and frankly being in Texas, this is the best way to try to tell this message to a client seems to be to use the football metaphor. But I was here, when I decided to dive deeper into all of this, I began educating myself and attending programs everywhere I could. And I had the good fortune of being at some programs that were conducted by Jim Grubman and also by Matt Wesley and some others. And Jim really spoke to me one day with this analogy where he says, picture a football field. And at one end of the field is this fabulous quarterback who has tremendous experience. He's been trained. He knows everything about what he's doing as a quarterback, and he hurls a pass down to the other end of the field, and it's a beautiful pass. And so here comes this football across the field to the opposite side of the football field. And standing at the opposite side of the football field are the receivers who have never been to a practice. No one's told them the rules of the game. They don't understand teamwork and how to work with each other. They don't communicate with each other. And they're standing there clueless. And here coming towards them is this football, which is an inheritance, okay? This football is coming at them. They don't know what to do with it when it comes. And what are the odds that when that football lands at their end of the field, that they're going to catch it, that they're going to run the field and score a touchdown? The odds are very, very slim. In fact, the odds are about 90% that they're going to fumble it. And, you hear the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves proverb, and it's so true that if you are not intentional about doing some planning and preparing these heirs, they're standing at the other end of this football field. This football is coming their way, and they're not going to score a touchdown with it. They're going to likely fumble it. And then Matt Wesley kind of put a punctuation mark on that story when I heard him speak and gave a football comment, because he commented that G1 down here, who is the quarterback, of the team, he said G1 needs to move from being the quarterback of the team to being the coach. And it's very easy to understand it that way. Your role as the patriarch and matriarch of this family is not to be the quarterback and hurl those passes down. It's to coach these G2s and G3s so that they know how to play the game when you're not out there on the field with them. So that's the football story. And believe me, it really gets people. They understand it. When I try to explain it other ways, they sometimes kind of are puzzled looking. And then I use the football story. I always give Jim Grubman credit. And they say, I get it now. Okay.
Those are two very, very powerful metaphors. And I do think, the simplicity belies the power, and people really do get it. So thank you for sharing that, Marvin. Another individual who's profoundly influenced you, I believe, is Jay Hughes. And you write a little bit, I read a little bit in your writing around the influence Jay's had on your thinking about the role of trustees and how we should be designing and administering trust. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I'd love to. And truly, Jay Hughes has, if I were to identify my idol in this space, it would be Jay Hughes. I've never had the privilege of meeting Jay, but I totally worship this fellow. And Jay, in all of his books on family wealth and other writings, he wrote an article called The Trustee as Mentor that became sort of a Bible for me. Because it woke me up to understand a lot of concepts that I didn't learn in school or that no one was teaching me out in the law practice. And it was the idea that a trustee has a much different job than I understood. Truly, for a trustee to do his or her job best, he or she needs to mentor these beneficiaries and really empower the beneficiaries to be able to handle all of the responsibilities that the trustee initially does. The trustee that does his job best is the one who kind of works himself out of a job. The beneficiaries have a responsibility to learn. So the trustee has a responsibility to mentor and to teach. The beneficiaries have a responsibility to learn. And if you don't do it this way, what I see so often is the bad outcome of a trust baby. You have beneficiaries who feel perhaps entitled, or they're getting this monthly allowance check from a trust, and they've lost all their initiative, or they have, frankly, no reason to wake up in the morning, no purpose to go achieve in their day. They begin to experience feelings of guilt. They experience feelings of inadequacy. And that's a bad recipe for an inheritance. And so what Jay explained to me for the first time, and that I had heard it from anybody, is the idea of creating empowered beneficiaries who have incentives and who feel good about themselves. And in his document, in that article, he actually has exhibits of the roles that trustees should play as a mentor, but also the roles a beneficiary should play as a beneficiary, and all the responsibilities of what the beneficiary should be learning. And one thing I really liked about it too was the idea of building into the trust this whole process called peer review, where every, say, 5 years or so, you would bring in an independent, objective party to check over, to make sure that the trustee is doing its job and the beneficiaries are doing their job, and you kind of have an opportunity for a checkup. And the peer review to me is it's very important, because they can kind of fill the role that the patriarch and matriarch might have been able to do if they still were around. But you now have people who can come in behind and check up to make sure this trust is operating as it was intended.
Marvin, beautifully spoken. I think it just really resonated with me when you said the trustee who's really doing their job well is working himself out of a job. And that's a beautiful concept, and really does speak to the power of the trustee to be a generative influence in the lives of the beneficiaries. Another of Jay's concepts that I could see has influenced you is his, suggestion that every family should maintain a balance sheet that isn't just the traditional financial balance sheet, but which captures the various capitals that Jay's spoken of. Do you want to share with us how you view the importance of human capital in the work we do with our clients?
I am a balance sheet sort of a guy. So when you talk in those terms, it really resonates for me. And you're so right. On the asset side, there's so much more to it than the dollars and cents, and how we keep score, with money is really just a very small part of the story. And the human capital has, to me, was expressed so well one time. Again, I'll go back to Matt Wesley on this. He did this research on 100-year families, and his work is so informative. But I read a letter that was written by the matriarch of a family to her family members and to future generations. And in this letter, the matriarch gives credit to her husband for having created this fabulous business enterprise that is now feeding generations of this family. And she's saying how grateful we shall all be to our ancestor for having done this. But as much as that business means to us, if it ever gets to the point that the family members are squabbling over it, and as much as we love this business, she says, I would rather you dismantle the business than squabble over it. And it was a very big wake-up call for me on that too, because people do love their businesses, but not to the point of letting a business tear apart a family. The human element here is so powerful, because there's so much more going on in these families than just the dollars and cents. I had another wake-up call. It was at a conference I attended for an organization called Fox, it's Family Office Exchange, and they had an annual conference, and they had all the topics you would expect. It was tax planning, estate planning, investing, all the numbers topics that I thought would be the key focus of this conference. And I look on the agenda, and there was a topic I thought, why is that on here, and who will be interested in that topic. Well, let me tell you, the topic that I thought was the least fit for the program turned out to be the hottest topic that got the most attention of the whole conference. And the topic was addiction. And I thought, here is this gathering of family offices from all around the world of wealthy families. And the topic of interest that trumped everything was dealing with problems of addiction. And I thought, oh man, isn't that interesting? Every family without exception said they were battling that in some way or another. And they said, you know, when you have issues like that going on in the family, if the money's perfect, it doesn't matter. If you can't, if those issues really do end up becoming most paramount. And to that end, I feel like we are learning here that the human element is where we need some focus. We need to be here for each other. These family members need to be supported by each other. And David Brooks writes a couple of books on this topic. One is the Road to Character, and he refers to, you know, all these attributes you try to accumulate under, you know, the road to character. They call it resume Marvin. But then he says, you know, as you get older, you begin to shift your focus, and it's not the resume Marvin that matters, it's eulogy Marvin that matters. It's the things that are not on your resume, but the things that you would put in your eulogy. And these are getting to the heart side of things. What did you do what mattered to you most? And here's where family starts to come up as really becoming more paramount than the financial aspects of what we do. And so, but then David wrote a second book called The Second Mountain. And he's talking about the human connection and the importance of establishing this human connection. And where is human connection more available to you than within your own family? So I'm thinking, let's work on the family here and achieve what I call, or what Tom Rogerson calls, family interdependence, not independence, interdependence. So we're there for each other. We support each other when times are rough. And so that's all part of this human capital element that Jay Hughes wakes me up to.
You know, I love these, just the great wisdom that you've shared with us, Brooks, Tom Rogerson, and this family interdependence concept takes me back to Covey's work, where he talked about moving from dependency to independence to interdependency. And I really do think it changes everything for individuals and families when we get to that stage where the family is such a strong, positive component that we are interdependent, helping each other move forward. Marvin, I'm going to skip to when you talk about that Fox meeting. It made me recall just how informative in your career the work you've done within Tiger 21 has been, and you know, you've been privileged to not only speak to these outstanding entrepreneurs and wealth holders, wealth creators, but you've also been privileged to listen to them. And I'd love you talk a little bit about getting a new understanding about what keeps them up at night. Do you want to share what those concerns are and what you've learned about how we best address those concerns?
You know, becoming a member of Tiger 21 was another very important part of my journey. You know, we all evolve. You know, this is not something that any of us set out to do, to become lawyers who have head and heart working together in holistic planning. We evolve into this. And part of that evolution for me was being involved with Tiger 21, which is a network of almost 1,000 members now, high net worth people, mostly in the US, who come together monthly for support meetings with about a dozen people in your group. That you treat this group sort of as your personal board of directors, and you are there for to help each other grow and learn. But what I've thought when I became a member of Tiger 21 was that I was going to be learning about investing. I thought that the real benefit to being a Tiger member was that I was going to learn how to invest money. And yeah, they do that, but that was by far the tiny piece of what I got from Tiger. The big piece from Tiger is about the relationships you form with each other and being there to help each other sort out the things that are troubling you. And when you ask these folks, what keeps you awake at night? The answer is not their money or their investing or their business. What keeps them awake at night, by and large, is worrying about their family, worrying how money will impact their family, worrying how the inheritance can possibly ruin kids. So they're worrying about the impact of this wealth on their family. And, to what end have I created all of this if I'm going to pass it down and it's going to create chaos for the next generation? And I thought, wow, this is not just a couple of people here saying this. This is almost everyone in the entire organization saying it. And so I became a big advocate for the family meeting. And because what I believe the way you tackle this, first and foremost, is to start opening the doors of communication. G1, G2, G3, we need to bring these people together, and we need to help them get comfortable communicating, developing communication skills with each other, and developing trust with each other. And then as part of this family meeting experience, we also become intentional about training future generations to inherit. You adopt a family education program. And so I think that the family meeting process is really essential to tackling the two biggest causes of family failure. The two biggest causes, Williams and Pricer, the Williams group, the two biggest causes of family failure are, number one, it's not lack of estate planning and lack of tax planning, okay? It's lack of communication and trust within a family, and it's unprepared heirs. Those are the biggest problems. So if you have a family meeting process where you are addressing these issues, we're not going to sweep things under the rug anymore. If you sweep it under the rug, my experience is that G1 dies and then this volcano erupts. It didn't go away. It gets worse. So the family meeting allows us to go ahead and, in a very controlled environment, start dealing with these things. And my very important to this, to advice in all of this with my Tiger 21 colleagues, is the patriarch of the family is not the one who should be running the meeting. Don't think you can go it alone or that you can sit at the head of the table. The patriarch needs to be a participant. The matriarch needs to be a participant, and you need to bring in a skilled facilitator to conduct the meeting. And that way you can allow open communication, and this process can really work. And I'll tell you the hardest thing of all, plan the first one. Plan the first meeting, because they intellectually they agree with you. They say, we need to embark on this, we need to do this. But if you can just get them to do the first meeting, the process generally starts to drive itself, because they will see that this works and they want to have more meetings.
There's great wisdom in that. Thank you, Marvin. I want to quote from a 2015 Trust and Estates article. I don't want people to think that Marvin has just lately come to this. He's been writing and speaking to this for quite a while now. And in fact, I'm really enjoying the weekly blog. If you're not following Marvin's blog, I totally encourage everyone listening live today or to the recording to Google Marvin and subscribe to his blog. The blog posts this year are centered around creating a family legacy. This particular article that I'm going to quote from in Trust and Estates was entitled "Creating a Family Legacy," and this is what really hit me powerfully when I read it. First, it's vital to look at the end game. When helping clients form their family legacies, there won't be a taxes saved column on the spreadsheet that can prove you've done your job well. So what's the goal? How do you know when to check the legacy completed box? Fundamentally, the estate planner's role in helping create a family legacy is twofold: establish goals and provide counsel for how to achieve those goals. So I love that there won't be a taxes saved column on the spreadsheet. That is so often the yardstick we use to measure success in the estate planning world. But you're really pointing us in a different direction. And I'm going to stand back here and let you just kind of go, Marvin. I'd love to hear what you feel are the best practices that we can encourage families to engage in. Certainly family meetings are where it all starts, and you've talked about the absolute critical importance of getting that first meeting going. But what are the best practices that will be built into those agendas, that will be the work that we're doing in between family meetings?
You know, what I have learned in this is we should not try to reinvent a wheel here. What we should do is look to the successful families and observe what are they doing, and let's copy from them. Again, the statistics are, the shirt sleeve statistics are, about 10% of families beat the odds, shirt sleeves and shirt sleeves in 3 generations. So what are these 10%ers doing? And what I'm observing here is they don't leave it up to chance. They don't just hope that the future generations are going to turn out well and get along. They take intentional steps. So what I have copied from them is to be intentional. And so, as I mentioned a moment ago, creating family, doing family meetings is a big piece of this. When you get together for these family meetings, one of the early tasks is to write a mission statement. I think every family needs to search inside itself and figure out its core. And I like that to be an activity that everyone participates in. This is not something top-down driven. The patriarch doesn't write this and then tell the family, here's our mission. This is an activity that everybody participates in, and they begin to discover their commonalities. And here's a family that may be at war on certain things, but they find that they share some very important values, and they can put together their mission statement. The Blum family did this. I mean, we have a 3-fold mission statement that we narrowed it down to 3. We have a long list of things we value, but number 1 is relationships. And number 2 is productive work. And number 3 is spirituality or meaning in our lives. I mean, that's ours, but every family figures out what its core is. And then that mission drives everything in your plan, all the discretionary decisions going forward. And I also advise them to document things in a legacy letter, sometimes called an ethical will. Write a love letter to your future generations and put in there your stories, lessons learned, your hopes and dreams for the aspirations for the family for the future, and leave this to your family, like that matriarch that I mentioned earlier that said, I'd rather you dismantle the business than squabble over it. I mean, that letter is to be read every year at that family annual meeting of that family. And philanthropy is a big piece of this. It's not all of it. I mean, some people think that this means, oh, we're just going to engage in philanthropy together. Well, yeah, that helps. That is a laboratory for much of what we're trying to achieve here, but it is a part of it. It is not the entire mix of things. And I think business succession planning is a piece of this puzzle. A lot of my entrepreneurs have neglected doing business succession planning. So one of the tools that we need to pull out here is to sit down with this family and help them craft a written plan for what will happen, not if the founder is gone, but when the founder is gone. And the founder says, well, I can't do that because I'm indispensable. And I have a quote I love on that saying, Charles de Gaulle, the leader of France, once said, cemeteries are full of indispensable people. Okay, you may think you're indispensable, but there's a cemetery full of people who thought that same thing. Somehow the world has to continue on after you. So it's waking them up to address these issues. But I want to tell you another big tool I've learned from successful families, and that is preserving family heritage. Stories of ancestors who overcame obstacles and were resilient. That has been a really powerful tool in helping families become a stronger and more bonded together unit. And have people sit around at a family meeting and tell these stories and memories, and especially the stories where their family member overcame some hard times, because that has been the case with almost every family. In my personal case, all four of my grandparents escaped Hitler and barely got out of Eastern Europe right before the Holocaust. And miraculously, they made it to America, but they got here without one penny in their pocket. And what my grandfather used to say was, all he had when he got to America was the knowledge between his ears. And he would say, you know, when you're in a situation like that and somebody takes away everything you have and you leave everything behind and you move to America like they did, he said, the lesson here is what you put into your mind, no one can ever take away from you. They can take away your possessions, those money portions of the balance sheet, but they can't take away the values. They can't take away the knowledge, you know. And so I think it's a really important activity to help people preserve their family stories. It not only has been proven to increase their self-esteem, but it also is a really powerful tool that when adversity strikes, if you know you descend from ancestors who knew how to survive, you can draw strength from that, and it will help you also conquer past your obstacles. So I've had many clients who shared these kinds of stories and at family meetings, and I began facilitating some family meetings. I generally do it with someone else. I don't generally fly solo here, but I generally do go and help. And I discovered that I had skills I never knew I had. I think all of us do. I think we all think we were trained to write documents, but lo and behold, you know, over these years as an estate planning lawyer, we've learned a lot about people, and we can help our clients address these problems because frankly, most of them are hurting and they need someone to help them address these family issues, their family dynamics. And we have a special seat at the table. And if we don't bring it up, who will? You know, the ideal time is when you're working with a client on their estate plan and you can say, let's talk about what's going on in your family. And these things begin to come out, and they are eager for somebody to help them address all this because they don't know what to do about it. And we can help them get them into a process to address these things. So there's stories after stories of family members, of family meetings that I've attended, but you know, I could share a couple more if you want me to here. I had one where the patriarch said, okay, we're going to have our first family meeting. And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start the meeting out by passing out the financials, and I'm going to go over all the investments that the family has. And I had to stop and say, whoa, 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 whoa. You know what? We'll get to that maybe about the third or fourth meeting. But the first and second meeting, we're not going to even talk about money. And he was so surprised. I said, no, this isn't going to be about money. And he was shocked, but now he gets it. I had another one. The patriarch said, let's have a session where I tell all of my success stories. And then we got to the meeting and the kids said, you know, we know those. What we really want to hear is, will you talk about your mistakes? And the patriarch thought, well, I wanted to forget those. And the kids say, no, we'll learn a whole lot more if you'll share with us all your mistakes that you made along the way and what you learned from them. That will be a session that the kids could learn a lot more from. So, you know, these are the kinds of things that I think successful families do, and that I pull out of my toolbox when I work with families and in family meetings, to help families heal and prosper, and and create a legacy that will carry on.
I've got one more question, Marvin, for you before we kind of open this up, but I want the listeners, please feel free to use the chat box. I see a couple of comments already in there that we'll get to, but please feel free to use chat or the Q&A boxes, or to raise your hand if you'd like to either raise a question or offer a comment to something that Marvin has shared to this point. Marvin, I loved the story that you shared about your own family, in terms of the fleeing the Holocaust and what your grandfather taught you there. That is, there's so much value in that. And I would just say, Williams and Presser, we need to tip our hat to them. Great research. It's had a pronounced influence in this field. I don't think enough recognition is given to the study by Marshall Duke and his co-researchers at Emory University. They're the ones that did the family stories research that has demonstrated just what you said in terms of the incredible value that it has in creating character and in fact building resilience in the lives of young family members. So there really is power in those family stories. But Marvin, so much of what you shared to this point is extremely valuable to both the attorneys, but the majority of those listening today are non-attorneys, and they're benefiting from what you're sharing as well. But there is something that is very unique, very powerful, and very innovative that I ran across in your writing, and it's this idea of main course, estate planning, looking at it as a main course, appetizers, and desserts. Could you explain that concept to us and what kind of falls into the category of main course versus the appetizers and the desserts?
I appreciate that, John A. It's funny, we invented that off the cuff one day in giving a talk, as I was holding up this chart called the Optimum Estate Plan. And I said, think of this like a menu. And in the center section of this chart, these are the main courses that everybody sits down and orders. And generally speaking, the main course is going to be your will, or more commonly, a living trust with a pour over will that's going to cover all the provisions that will benefit first your spouse and then after you're gone. And then there's also in that section the ancillary documents, powers of attorney, and taking care of the contingencies that might arise during my own lifetime, the planner, the client's own lifetime. That's the main course. And I said, we first have to get that done. That's the basic plan. But when you look at the menu, you'll notice that there are also sections on the menu. One is for appetizers. And let's explore on the appetizer section, the idea of doing some ordering up some dishes that will benefit the rest of your family and provide what we would refer to as their traditional inheritance. And the tax efficient way to do this traditional inheritance is through trust planning. We're familiar with these tools, the ILIT, irrevocable life insurance trust, or the defective grantor trust, or DIGIT, or an IDIGIT. I'm a big fan of the 678 trust, also known as a beneficiary defective trust. I'm also a fan of the GRAT. There's all these tools. Well, those are all ways to secure an inheritance for the next generation that bypasses the estate tax system. And I think that's the tax efficient way to provide for your family. So in the middle of the menu, you've got your main course providing for you and your spouse. On the left side here of the chart, your appetizers, you're now providing for the rest of your family. Once you've done that, you've taken care of yourself and your spouse and your kids, your family. Now you can turn to the fun part, which is the other part of the menu, which is the dessert section. Now let's order some desserts. And we get to the really fun and gratifying part of the planning. Desserts are the opportunity to provide for causes that are meaningful to you. Generally, that's charitable causes, charitable vehicles such as a donor advised fund or a private foundation, or trust vehicles such as a charitable remainder trust or a charitable lead trust. But there's another dessert I want to mention, and it is the family legacy dessert, where you're not only leaving your children a traditional inheritance that they can spend for their HEMS, health, education, maintenance, support, but now we're leaving them a dessert with some resource and money in there that can provide for family legacy. And I have, Tom Rogers and I came up with this idea. We won't go into all of it today, but it's a type of a trust vehicle called a FAST, a family advancement sustainability trust. But the idea of a FAST is we're going to endow the family meeting process. So you're setting aside some money in a vehicle that will be used to pay for family travel, family enrichment, family meetings, family education, all the stuff that successful families are doing, and it costs money. And my experience is that if you don't set that money aside to endow it, G2 often drops the ball, because what happens is G1 will pay for all that while G1 is alive. But when G1 dies and you want to have a family meeting and the cost of this family meeting $30,000, and you got 3 kids, and you go to them and say, I need $10,000 from each of you so that we can have this retreat and cover all the costs. You know, they don't always say yes. You know, they may want to they may want to remodel their kitchen that year. So, you know, they say turn you down, and suddenly you don't have the money to do it, or nor maybe you may not have the leadership to do it. So this trust, this FAST trust, is about setting aside money to pay for it. So the money is there, and that's not money available for HEMS. This is money to enrich the family, to pay for the things that will make the family unit more a stronger unit. So that's part of the dessert too. And I love to get to the dessert part. Generally, you can't succeed talking about the desserts with a client until you've dealt with their main course and their appetizer. The order of events generally works that way. You first have to take care of the main course, the appetizer, and then you get to shift to the dessert and begin to have more fun with the planning. And frankly, as a planner, it's the gratifying part. It's where you feel like I have made a difference. I am in a career that actually impacts people's lives and is making the world a better place, and families, helping to save families. Now I feel like I've got a career that really is a meaningful career.
Well, thank you for that explanation of appetizers, main course, and desserts. I'm fond of using a metaphor that traditional estate planning is like a fast food drive-through experience. And what we're trying to do with purposeful planning is create more of a sit down, less of a transaction, much more of an experience. And I think you capture the vision of that. You're really making that a reality with your clients, Marvin. We do have a couple of comments, and this is the time when we'd love to have people raise their hands so we can open their mics, but feel free to just post a comment in chat if your mic isn't working. Let's see.
Let's go ahead and take Sylvia's question first, since I see she needs to head out soon. I will unmute your line, Sylvia. All right. So feel free to ask your question live.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Marvin, I'm most impressed, and it's really resonating with me because it's the journey that I have been going through. Started out just loving tax and estate planning, worked in a large firm in Toronto with a preeminent tax lawyer named Wolf Goodman. And just, very technical, and of course wanting to craft the best documents and all that. And of course, through my learnings at PPI and thanks to John A, I've really embraced this soft side and family meetings very much so. So one of my questions is, as a lawyer, of course, I've been doing some training. I'm a family enterprise advisor, which is a designation we have in Canada, learning a lot about family meetings and facilitating family meetings. And you said that you have another person working with you when you do family meetings. What kind of skill sets do you suggest? Like, do you think the person should have a psychology background? Or, I'm just sort of interested in what you think, because you don't, I mean, you sound like you'd be doing a great job on your own with family meetings, but what do you suggest would be a good complement to that?
I think you're right, Sylvia, that very likely we could probably go it alone. Many of us have probably got skills to do that. I just felt like for the first several, you don't want to fly solo, because you want to learn the tools to use if things start to go haywire in a meeting, and they frankly will. It happens because these are real families and they have issues. And so I like to bring someone along who has some experience dealing with family governance or family dynamics. It can be a psychologist, but it doesn't have to be. In the world today, we have so many people who have adopted this life coach title. And I don't know what the requirements are to be a life coach. I think many of us probably could become one. But I think a life coach sort of a person has the right skill set. And I don't really think they have to have formal credentials. I think that they can just be wired the right way to do it. I was once at a program, and the attorney that was speaking, a fellow named Chris Erblick from Phoenix, was saying that he conducts family meetings. And I said, well, Chris, but what do you do if the topics get really delicate and there's a lot of tension in the room? And he looked at me and he said, I respond with love. And I thought, interesting. That's a skill that we probably all already have. Another thing I have learned is you do pre-meeting interviews with each participant, and you try to ferret out any hot button issues before you walk into the room, so that you're not blindsided by these issues. And you have a plan that when things like that come up, we're going to address those at another time, but we're going to put them over in the parking lot for now. And because we don't want to derail the process right now. Or if something gets really heated, if you have somebody who's there who is a coach or a psychologist or with those skills, they can take that person out of the room and have a private one-on-one to try to diffuse situation, because you don't want to disrupt the whole family meeting process when something flies off like that. And so, Sylvia, I think you probably, like me, could go it alone, but I would be more comfortable to have some kind of a coach or family dynamics person in the room with you.
Thank you very much. And I agree with you. I have been conducting family meetings, usually with a colleague of mine, and we have always done the one-on-ones, because we want to know if there are minefields and where to step, where not to step, and what might be coming up. So I agree with you. The one-on-one is invaluable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I know you have to run. It's great. Appreciate your raising that question. There were a couple of other comments that, and I see Angelica Olson has also offered a comment saying, I do the kind of work Marvin's referring to, and I am a family business and generational wealth coach. So thank you, Angelica. And I believe you are the type of person that Marvin was referring to. There were a couple of other earlier comments I'm going to share with you, Marvin, that are kind of affirmations, exclamation points to comments that you were offering. Grant Conroy, who we heard from very early in the conversation before we started the recording, mentioned that The Beneficiary Primer, a book by Patricia Angus, is also a very good and easy read on the role of the beneficiary. So that actually, thank you, Grant. I'm aware, I actually met Patricia. She was, as many people know, Jay Hughes's first lieutenant, I guess I would say, right-hand person for many years. and she's doing great work, and this is great to know. And then Ed and Annie, when you talked about David Brooks' book, The Road to Character, Ed just offered a resounding kind of affirmation that The Road to Character is a terrific book. Curious to ask Marvin, are there any other books that you would recommend that you think our listeners today would highly benefit from reading?
You know, I'm just going to go back to my idol here, Jay Hughes, and I would just say, his Family Wealth and then The Voice of the Rising Generation are just so right on, and The Cycle of the Gift. I mean, I just think Jay has such remarkable heart and head confluence happening here, and that's really where I turn. And all of his writings on family trust to me just resonate so much.
Yeah, the most recent book, Family Trust, is to me it kind of is a sampling of all of those, but it's hard. I think you've got to start where you suggested, Marvin. I really do think if people haven't read Family Wealth, Keeping It in the Family, they have to. And The Voice of the Rising Generation and Cycle of the Gift are definitely very, very important follow-ons from that. I can't thank you enough, Marvin, for sharing today, for just the example that you're setting and the work that you're doing, demonstrating that it is possible to have a very successful law practice and be engaged deeply in qualitative work. I guess I do have one final question I'd throw to you. This is a question we probably should ask every guest. You talked about the importance of getting that first meeting launched and creating the tradition of family meetings. Couldn't agree more. But I'd love if you have any suggestions for us on how to overcome the resistance. What do you find most effective in tearing down the reluctance and resistance that clients either are very quietly displaying or perhaps very actively displaying to try to get them to embrace qualitative planning and not just focus on the structure of the technical or quantitative plan?
John A., I wish I had the answer to that one, because
I hear you.
Frankly, that's where I am right now in my practice on this, is trying to figure that out. Precisely that question is, you see, I'm a 45-year tax lawyer, and I can talk to clients about saving tax, and they immediately want to pull the trigger and give me the go-ahead to do it. There is a sense of urgency in their minds. And I am trying to figure out what is the vocabulary, what's the right way to word this so that I can create a sense of urgency that's similar to that in the family legacy planning space. And I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. I welcome input from everybody on that. I'm a student in this too. I'm a novice at this still. I've been doing it a long time, but I still am I'm learning, and I'm a novice. And I've really believed that getting them to the place where you've dealt with the technical, and you can now put that to the side and saying, let's talk about the stories that keep you awake at night, the things that keep you awake at night. What is on your mind that we haven't addressed, and helping them understand that you can do something about this. And I think just repeating, it's probably repetitive. You've got to continue to help them realize that the urgency of doing this is just as important, if not more important, than saving tax.
Well, I thank you for your humility and honesty. And I think I would say I'm there too. And I have found a few things that have worked with some clients, but they don't always work. But I would just suggest that you need to come armed, as Marvin did today, with empirical, quantitative data. So the Williamson Presser, the Marshall Duke, these research studies that offer empirical results around the benefits of qualitative planning are important. I think we need to be able to blend that with what you've been doing, which is offer success stories, right? So we need to warn them about the failures, but also offer success stories. And I think the stories that may appeal to the heart can, in combination with the quantitative empirical data that suggests this is so important, when we can blend those two together, I think we are creating some type of cocktail that may enhance our odds of success.
I will
can't
say one
thank you
other quick thing is,
Yes.
ironically, I think COVID has actually helped us on this. I think that the coming out of this COVID-19 pandemic, God willing, we're coming out, is actually creating in people's minds more of an awareness of the need to address these things. First of all, they're more aware of their mortality. But in addition, if they've been sheltering at home, they're probably more acutely aware of family dysfunction. And maybe they've had time to contemplate their legacy and learn that, you don't have to wait till you can all get into one room. We can do this by Zoom. And one of the holdups to having the first family meeting is we can't find a date where everybody can travel to one place. Well, now what we can tell them is, let's not wait till then. Let's do a Zoom. And you know what? It's not as good as being in the same room together, but it's better than not having a meeting at all. So we've learned how to do Zoom. That has actually helped.
Great point about the timeliness of where we are and the power of Zoom as a medium to make family meetings easier, less difficult. Thank you so much, Marvin. I hope you'll come back. We've got a lot more ground to cover with Marvin, and we'll make sure that we find another convenient time in his schedule to bring him back if he's willing to come back. And with that, Leandra, I'm going to turn it back to you to offer, announce what's coming.
Thank you. I'm honored to have been here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marvin.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today.